Space is very, very big. So big, in fact, that if you tried to walk across it, you would die almost immediately. Which is one of the reasons many astronomers prefer to use telescopes. And somewhere out there, beyond the warm glow of the sun, beyond the impatient little inner planets, and beyond Jupiter showing off with his storms and his unreasonable size, we find Saturn. Slow, cold, distant Saturn. The sort of planet that looks at joy and asks whether it has planning permission. To the naked eye, Saturn was the last of the wandering lights visible to the ancient world, the outer boundary of the old cosmos, the final checkpoint, the place where the celestial road runs out and a miserable man in a high-vis jacket tells you that the bridge is closed for maintenance. For thousands of years, Saturn has been associated with time, age, limits, and the quiet but devastating sentence,
"You probably should have started this earlier."
Which may sound depressing, and it is. But Saturn is also the planet of structure, patience and endurance, of the hard-won wisdom that comes from being repeatedly slapped by reality until you finally read the instructions. So today we begin our journey through the planets with the old ruler at the edge of the ancient sky, the cosmic headmaster, the lord of limits, the patron saint of correct procedure. Welcome to Saturn.
Have you got a permit for that introduction?
Just before we carry on, we've got some exciting news. Some very exciting news. Do you want to tell everybody what it is? No. We got merch! Finally, the channel has merch. We've got jumpers, t-shirts, magnets, stickers, you name it, we've probably put a logo on it. Just check out the shopping section below. Anyway, back to the video. So, we've decided to kick off this new series about the planets with this crazy joker. Oh yeah, it's going to be a rip-roaring barrel of laughs today. Hold on to your sandwich boxes and be careful your sides don't split. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Saturn.
Hello.
Haha, you just don't know what he's going to say next. So in this episode, we're going to be finding out all about the old ruler of time, limits, discipline, responsibility, maturity, melancholy, structure, hardship, patience, endurance, and lots of other words that make you want to open the wine early. But it's not all doom and gloom. Saturn has an important role in keeping us focused so we can hit our full potential. I often hear people say, "Why is Saturn so down on me?" Well, the truth is that Saturn will go down on you, very hard and with great force, until you come good.
Through discipline.
What? Oh, okay, if that's your thing.
You know full well that's not what I meant.
Hey man, I'm not judging. Different strokes for different folks. So in this episode, we're going to be taking a wild ride around Saturn. We're going to see what the ancient scribes had to say, meet the gods and gloomy old powers gathered around him in myth, stick him in a birth chart, and we're going to look at the surprising reason why anyone would want to use planetary magic to work with him. But first, our resident foolish person is about to get a lesson in patience. The Fool's Odyssey. The Fool has now worked his way around the Zodiac and got his ticket stamped by all 12 signs. However, Leo has informed him that he won't be going home until he's visited all the planets of the solar system. I thought that was the whole journey.
Oh, no. That was just the first half.
So, I'm not going home? With his hopes dashed, he returns to the Cosmic Constellation Express, only to find the very same battered old bus that started this whole ridiculous business in the first place. All aboard for the Solar System Circular! This bus looks like it's seen better days. How dare you! This bus has carried prophets, pilgrims, and that bloke from Wigan who thought he was going to Blackpool. They don't make them like this anymore. I'm not surprised. There's a lot of smoke coming out of it. That's not smoke, it's cosmic ambience. It smells like burning tyres. Are you sure it's safe? Define safe. Will it get me back home? Eventually. Probably. Anyway, hurry up and get on. We're already running late. Here, take this. What is it? That's your planetary bus pass. You need to collect the official mark from each planet you visit. Oh, great. Here we go again. The Fool steps on board the clapped-out cosmic coach to begin his journey around the planets. Soon he finds himself sitting in a traffic jam. What's going on? We're just coming up to Saturn. It's always like this. Why? Saturn is the checkpoint of the solar system, and it's been under construction for about 4 billion years. After a lengthy wait, the bus finally makes it to the front of the queue. Welcome to Saturn, lad. Go on then, off you go. Aren't you coming with me? No chance. Last time I lost about 40 years. The Fool makes his way to a small office, where he finds a serious-looking gentleman sat behind a desk.
Welcome to the Saturnian Bureau of Celestial Bureaucracy. Please state your business.
I need a mark on my planetary bus pass.
Very well. Take a seat.
And then what?
You wait.
For how long?
Until it's your turn.
The Fool finds his way to the waiting room, where he finds a rather skinny-looking fellow. Hello, how long have you been here?
Not that long, since about the Bronze Age.
That sounds like forever.
You get used to it.
Really?
No.
After a while, the Fool gets bored and goes back to talk to Saturn. Look, is there any way of speeding this up? I've got the rest of the planets to get to.
Yes, there is.
Brilliant. What is it?
Stop trying to speed it up.
Ugh, fine. I'll just carry on waiting then. The clock ticks, the dust settles, and slowly, painfully, the Fool stops fighting the delay. After what feels like an age, Saturn finally calls him back to his desk.
Fool, you have passed the test and learned the lesson.
What lesson was that then?
That you can't move forward until you stop trying to escape the place you're in. Time isn't just an obstacle, it gives things shape. Delays teach patience. Limits teach discipline. Waiting teaches you that not every door opens just because you rattle the handle like an impatient toddler.
So does that mean you'll mark my bus pass?
I suppose so. Come on then, hand it over. There, you may continue. But remember, Fool, time is not your enemy, and the road doesn't get shorter by complaining about it.
The Fool finds his way back to the bus driver. Did you get your official mark? Yeah, eventually. By the way, what happens if I lose this bus pass? You'll have to come back to Saturn and start all over again. Bugger that. I'll guard it with my life. Let's get out of here before he tries to teach me another lesson. And so, with his bus pass marked for the first time, the Fool continues on the knackered old bus to the next stop on the solar system circular. To be continued. The history of Saturn. Before Saturn became the planet of old age and grim paperwork, he was also remembered as a fallen king. By the time we reach Roman poet Manilius, Saturn already has the air of a dethroned power. Not just slow, cold and ancient, but a former ruler, a cosmic pensioner with a grudge. In Astronomica he says, "In Saturn's seat, though once he ruled above, enjoyed that power and filled the throne of Jove. But thence thrown down he makes his last retreat, to this low place, and fills this humble seat." We'll come back to the family drama in the mythology section, because there's a lot of it. But for now, the important thing is that Saturn is already being imagined as an old power brought low. Not the glittering king of the gods, but the ruler after the throne has gone. Ptolemy gives us a much more technical version of Saturn's character. For him, Saturn is chilly, as it's placed in the most distant orbit from the Sun and Moon. He says Saturn, therefore, since he's cold and inimical to heat, moving also in a superior orbit, most remote from the luminaries, occupies the signs opposite to Cancer and Leo. These are Aquarius and Capricorn. In other words, the Sun and Moon get the warm seats by the fire, while Saturn is placed at the far end of the celestial dining table, next to a drafty window, with a rickety chair and a damp napkin. By the time Saturn reaches the magical texts of the medieval and Renaissance period, he's gathered a whole celestial admin department around him. He's got names, spirits, intelligences, angels, seals, and the general atmosphere of a council office where no one has smiled since the 1400s. This is also where we meet Saturn's planetary square, the tiddliest of the bunch, weighing in at a mere 3x3 grid. The numbers 1 to 9 are arranged so that every row, column and diagonal adds up to 15, so it's an ordered system. Saturn would certainly approve of that. We're not going to get too deep into it here, or it'll turn into the Fool's Guide to Spreadsheet Necromancy, but in later ceremonial and Renaissance magic, these squares were used with numbers, Hebrew letters, divine names, and probably a small amount of ceremonial farting in a southerly direction to create the sigils and seals associated with the planet. And once the seals and sigils start appearing, so do the spiritual powers attached to them. Cassiel has been named as Saturn's ruling angel, often associated with solitude, restraint, time, and the heavier lessons of existence. Cassiel has also been described as the angel of tears and temperance, which feels entirely appropriate. Saturn was never going to be assigned an angel with jazz hands. Alongside Cassiel, Saturn is also given a planetary intelligence called Argiel, whose name means flee from God. In this kind of magical system, the intelligence is the more ordered and elevated expression of the planet. So if Saturn gives us limitations and discipline, Argiel is the part of that current that makes it useful rather than just depressing. Getting to the bottom of the spiritual hierarchy, we bump into Zazel, who was mentioned in the Key of Solomon, which is exactly the sort of place you'd expect Saturn's darker planetary spirit to be lurking. In any case, he's been described as the eternal rebel. If Argiel is Saturn's ordered intelligence, Zazel is resistance itself, the locked gate, the heavy chain, the bouncer who won't let you in because you're wearing jeans. The mythology of Saturn. Long before Saturn became the Roman old man with a sickle and a serious family problem, the Babylonians knew the planet as Kajamanu, meaning something like the constant, which makes sense because Saturn is slow and steady, definitely not in a rush. It was associated with Ninurta, the Mesopotamian god of farming, law, scribes, hunting and war, which may sound like a rather chaotic resume, but it does give us a surprisingly good early Saturn. Discipline, authority, severity, and the general sense of someone who knows exactly where the boundary stones are buried. Zipping forward, we also find Saturn on the Dendera Zodiac in Egypt, where he's shown as a bull-headed form of Horus, sometimes translated as Horus the Bull, or Horus, Bull of the Sky. And just to be clear, this doesn't mean Saturn is associated with Taurus. In this context, the bull is part of Saturn's Egyptian planetary imagery, not the zodiac sign Taurus. Ancient symbolism was very fond of reusing animals, presumably because no one had invented copyright laws. Heading over to ancient Greece, where Saturn appears as Kronos, one of the Titans, and the son of Aronos the sky and Gaia the earth. Unfortunately, Aronos was not exactly father of the year. He imprisoned some of his children deep within the earth, so Gaia came up with the sort of family therapy plan that involved giving one of the children a sickle. Kronos used that sickle to overthrow his father and become the ruler in his place, which sounds brilliant until you remember that myths are very fond of irony. Kronos was then told that one of his own children would overthrow him, just as he had overthrown his father. So in an attempt to avoid the prophecy, he swallowed each of his children as soon as they were born. I'm no expert, but I reckon that's considered poor parenting. Eventually, his wife Rhea hid the youngest child, Zeus, and gave Kronos a stone wrapped in baby clothes instead. Kronos swallowed the stone, because apparently even ancient gods could be defeated by a convincing enough blanket. Zeus grew up, forced Kronos to release his brothers and sisters, and led the Olympians in a war against the Titans. Kronos was defeated, and the old order gave way to the new. So Saturn, through Kronos, becomes the image of old power trying to preserve itself. He's time, fear, inheritance, limitation, and the uncomfortable truth that everything eventually gets replaced, even gods waving sickles about. When Kronos becomes Saturn in Roman mythology, the mood changes slightly. He's still old, still powerful, and still carrying that sickle, but Rome also remembers him as an agricultural god. Saturn was also linked with the Golden Age, a mythical time before civilization became complicated, when the earth provided freely, no one needed laws, and there was no need for customer service departments. So Roman Saturn is not just the gloomy old planet of limits and endings, he's also the memory of an older world, both the old ruler who fears being replaced and the old god who remembers when life was simpler, which is probably why he feels less like a villain and more like a retired headmaster standing in a vegetable patch muttering that everything went wrong when people stopped respecting carrots. The psychology of Saturn. In psychological terms, Saturn is where things get uncomfortably real. Jung called Saturn the planet of reality, which is about as Saturnian as a phrase can get. No glitter or fantasy, just reality, standing in a doorway asking why the thing still hasn't been done. Jung even described his own development in distinctly Saturnian terms. He said, "The ruler of my birth, old Saturnus, slowed down my maturation process to such an extent that I became aware of my own ideas only at the beginning of the second half of my life, i.e. exactly 36 years. That's Saturn in a nutshell. Slow maturation, delayed confidence, wisdom arriving late, wearing sensible shoes and complaining about the state of the path. Psychologically, Saturn is not the part of us that wants instant transformation. It's the part that grows through time, failure and repetition. It can feel very heavy and frustrating, but it also builds something solid. Saturn says no, you don't get to skip the difficult bit, which is annoying but also horribly useful. Jung goes on to link Saturn with gloom, writing, "And Saturn personifies gloom and all those manifestations which originate in the state of gloom or cause gloom. The tempter and the purifier are two of Saturn's titles," which is cheerful. But again, this is not just Saturn is miserable, job done. The important words are tempter and purifier. Saturn tempts us into bitterness, fear, avoidance, cynicism and despair. That's the shadow side, the part that says, don't bother, it's too late, you'll fail anyway. Also, your knees hurt. But Saturn also purifies. It strips away fantasy, excuses and shortcuts. It shows us what's real, what's weak, what needs work, and what can actually survive under pressure. So psychologically, Saturn isn't pleasant, but he is necessary. He's the cold room where the nonsense freezes off, the reality check, the miserable old sod at the gate who won't let us through until we've actually become the person that we keep pretending to be. Saturn in the chart. So by now, I think we've probably got a pretty good handle on Saturn's temperament. He's the responsible, disciplined ruler of order, standing there with a stopwatch and a hemorrhoid cushion. But once we put Saturn into a birth chart, he stops being just a gloomy old god with a clipboard and becomes something much more personal, the place where life asks us to grow up. So let's take a look at some of the astrological nuts and bolts. Firstly, Saturn is considered to be a bit dry and chilly. Ptolemy had this to say: Saturn produces cold and dryness, for he is the most remote both from the sun's heat and from the earth's vapours. We talked earlier about how Saturn traditionally rules Capricorn and Aquarius, which sit opposite Cancer and Leo, the signs ruled by the moon and the sun, which is very Saturn. He doesn't get the sunny throne or the cosy lunar armchair. He gets the cold stone bench at the edge of the room, where he can make sure everyone's behaving themselves. Capricorn gives us Saturn as structure, ambition and responsibility. Aquarius gives us Saturn as principles, rules and very strong opinions about how society should be organised. Now let's talk about Saturn's essential dignities, which is basically a way of asking how comfortable a planet is in a particular sign. Is it at home? Is it an honoured guest? Is it awkwardly standing in the kitchen wondering where to put its coat? A planet in its own sign is said to be in domicile or rulership. It can act naturally there. Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius, so in those signs, Saturn has the keys and his own coffee cup. A planet in exaltation is not at home, but is treated with respect. Saturn is exalted in Libra, where his discipline becomes balance, law, fairness and careful judgment. A planet in detriment is in the sign opposite its rulership, so it has to work in unfamiliar conditions. Saturn is in detriment in Cancer and Leo, where his cool distance can struggle with the lunar softness and solar confidence. And finally, a planet in fall is opposite its exaltation. Saturn falls in Aries, where his slow, cautious long-term planning is shoved into a sign that wants to kick the door open and call it strategy. Now, when we look at Saturn in a birth chart, we're asking two main questions. The sign shows how Saturn behaves, what style his discipline takes. The house shows where that lesson tends to play out, whether it's career, relationships, identity, money, or whatever unfortunate department Saturn has decided to pay a surprise visit to. But Saturn isn't just bad luck or where everything goes wrong, it's where life slows us down and makes us put the work in. So with that in mind, let's take a look at some examples. First up, let's put Saturn in Aries, where Saturn is considered to be in fall, which is astrology's polite way of saying that he's not exactly enjoying himself. Here Saturn has to do his slow, careful, responsible Saturn work through Aries, the sign of speed, courage, and opening doors with his forehead. So this is discipline trying to express itself through impulse, like a health and safety inspector being asked to lead a cavalry charge.
I provide discipline, structure, and restraint. Great, let's do it quickly. That rather defeats the point.
Now let's put Saturn in Capricorn, where Saturn is in domicile, so the Lord of Time has finally found his home, his chair, and the correct form for requesting another form. Here Saturn expresses himself through ambition and long-term achievement. At its best, this can give discipline and the ability to build something through hard work. But the danger is becoming too severe. Capricorn wants results, while Saturn wants standards and consequences, so this can become cold, overworked, or convinced that rest is a moral failing.
We must climb steadily toward lasting achievement.
Right, I've cancelled lunch.
A promising start.
Now let's see how he gets on in a couple of houses. The fourth house is home, family, and emotional foundations. So here Saturn's lessons may arrive through family responsibility, a need for security, or the feeling that safety has to be built slowly rather than simply received. In other words, Saturn has come to inspect the basement.
There's damp in the ancestral foundations, emotional subsidence in the rear wall, and someone has been storing unresolved issues under the stairs.
Now let's move Saturn into the 10th house. This place is all about career, reputation, and the role we play in public life. So here Saturn can bring ambition, but also pressure. There may be a feeling that success has to be earned the hard way, that you have to prove yourself before anyone takes you seriously.
Congratulations, you're now senior enough to receive more work, more blame, and a mug that says team leader.
So that's just a few examples of Saturn at work. The sign shows how Saturn behaves. The house shows where in life he turns up with a stopwatch and a frown. But if we didn't show your specific placement, fear not. I'm putting a whole video out next week that shows Saturn in all 12 signs and houses. Yes, I'm going back to weekly uploads, and if that's not Saturn's influence, then I don't know what is. Saturn in the sky. Time now to have a look at the actual planet in the night sky. Astronomically speaking, Saturn is the 6th planet from the Sun, the 2nd largest planet in the solar system, and the slowest and farthest of the classical planets. So that's the ones visible to the naked eye and known to the ancient astrologers. A year on Saturn lasts for about 10,832 Earth days. So if you lived on Saturn, you might make it to the age of 4 if you were really lucky. You certainly wouldn't have to worry about getting fat on birthday cake. Like Jupiter, Saturn is a gas giant, made mostly of hydrogen and helium, but its most famous feature is obviously the rings. Saturn isn't the only planet with rings, but it is the one that looked at the assignment and decided to make it theatrical. NASA describes them as the most spectacular and complex ring system in the solar system. The rings are made of countless pieces of ice and rock, ranging from tiny grains to larger chunks, all orbiting around the planet like the most beautiful traffic jam in existence. Saturn also has a frankly excessive number of moons. NASA currently lists over 270, but that number is increasing all the time as astronomers keep finding more. Titan is the famous one. It's actually larger than the planet Mercury, with a thick atmosphere and lakes of methane. One of Saturn's moons, Enceladus, is now considered to be one of the most promising places in the solar system to search for possible microbial life. Beneath its icy crust is a subsurface ocean, and its plumes contain water, salts, and organic molecules. No life has been found yet, but it may have some of the ingredients life needs, which is surprisingly hopeful for something orbiting Saturn, the planet most likely to tell Hope to come back with the correct paperwork.
Correspondence Corner!
Now it's time to have a look at those mystical associations. Kicking off with the tarot, Saturn is usually associated with the World card, or the universe if you're using the Thoth deck, and also with the element of Earth, which might seem a bit strange at first. Saturn is the cold, distant planet at the edge of the old visible cosmos, while Earth is, well, the bit that we keep dropping our toast on. But symbolically it works because Saturn is limitation, structure, boundary and form. Earth is matter, body, weight and reality, and the world is the completed pattern, the spirit brought down into physical form. Saturn gives the dancer somewhere to dance. Without Saturn, everything remains possibility. With Saturn, it becomes solid, limited, and therefore capable of actually existing. Which is rather annoying because it means Saturn was right all along. Dreams do need structure, and visions need boundaries, and apparently enlightenment still requires a degree of being sensible. It also makes sense in the Fool's journey. The Fool travelled through the whole sequence and finally reached the completed pattern, which is lovely until Saturn quietly points out that completion is not the same as escape. It's incarnation, the soul learning how to live inside reality without trying to wiggle out through a side door. Moving on to the Tree of Life, Saturn corresponds to Binah, the third Sephira, whose name means understanding. Binah is also often called the Great Mother, which may seem confusing after spending all this time with Saturn as a cantankerous male god, holding a sickle and a grudge. But this isn't really about gender, it's about function. Binah receives the raw creative force of Hokmah and gives it form. She contains it and makes manifestation possible. So Binah is the mother, not because she's soft, cuddly and gives everyone biscuits, but because she's the principle of form giving. Binah is the womb, but a womb is also a boundary, and that's where this planet fits perfectly. With Saturn, things become something definite and real, something that can exist without immediately leaking all over the carpet. In the mystical Kabbalah, Dion Fortune says any god who has an analogy with Saturn will be referred to Binah, as will any goddess who might be termed the primordial mother, the superior Eve. The supernal triangle of Keter, Hokmah and Binah always refers to the old gods, which every pantheon recognises as the predecessors of those forms of godhead worshipped by the current faith. Thus Rhea and Kronos would be referred to Binah and Hokmah. Now we're going to have a look at some planetary magic, which begs the question, why the hell would anyone want to invite more Saturn into their life? Are we desperate for more limits, delays and responsibilities? Haven't we got enough bills to pay and washing up to do? Well, the truth is that Saturn can be an excellent planet to work with. It might be difficult when it arrives unconsciously as blockages and pressure, but it comes into its own when you work with it for things like self-discipline, commitment and structure. For example, you might want to break a bad habit, develop patience, commit to a long-term project, or face a fear instead of avoiding it. We're not saying, please Saturn make my life harder, we're saying, please help me become the sort of person who can handle the hard things. Now if you want to go deep into this kind of thing, I can recommend a book called Planetary Magic by Denning and Phillips. You can also get the information from 3 books of occult philosophy by Agrippa, although Planetary Magic is much easier to digest if you're new to this stuff. However, for this series we're going to keep things pretty simple, or we'll be here until Saturn has gone round the sun again. So let's have a look at some magic we can try out. Firstly, we need to think about our intention, and we want to be specific about this. It's no good thinking I would like to be vaguely better at things. In the case of Saturn, it could be something like I'll stop feeding this habit, I will complete this project, or I will be more patient with my husband practicing the tuba at 6 AM. Once we've figured out what we want, we would then choose the best day to perform this magic, which is Saturday in this case. We then want to set up a space with some Saturn related bits and pieces. Now just to be clear, you don't need every single item on this list. The correspondences are there to help focus the mind, not turn your living room into a Saturnian shrine, but you could light a black or very dark candle. Partly because Saturn is connected to Binah on the Tree of Life, but also because Saturn is distant, serious, and unlikely to turn up wearing a pink hat and a pair of comedy breasts. If you've got a tarot deck, then you want to whip out the World card. You can also burn some incense. A traditional blend for Saturn is 1 ounce of myrrh, half an ounce of crushed cassia buds, and 8 drops of oil of violet. You can make it yourself, or you can do what I do, just buy some Saturn incense sticks and let someone else deal with it. The corresponding stones for Saturn tend to be dark, like black onyx, obsidian, and smoky quartz. Apparently diamond is also associated, which is a bit of a curveball, but generally any dark stone is good. If you've got some diamond jewellery then that's great, but you don't need to bankrupt yourself. Also, if you wanted to, you could draw the planetary square that we talked about earlier and place that nearby. Saturn's corresponding metal is lead, so you might have something made out of that, but do bear in mind that lead is toxic, so you might be better off skipping that part. So it's Saturday, you're in your space, you've got a dark candle and some myrrh incense burning, you're wearing your diamond necklace and your lead jockstrap, and you've got the World Tarot card nearby. Now it's time to write your intention down. Make it clear, practical and serious. So it could be, I will work on my passion project for 30 minutes every day. Or I will limit myself to 1 bowl of ice cream every week. Or I will resist the urge to shove that stupid tuber up my husband's arse in the morning. Then you would say that intention out loud with feeling, as though it's already happened. This is also the perfect time to do a tarot reading about your intention. Next, you just sit quietly for a while before saying a closing line like, by the power of Saturn, this work is sealed by discipline, patience and action. Then you take that piece of paper with the intention written on it, fold it up and put it in your purse or your wallet so you can keep it with you. The next step is to take some kind of positive action toward that intention. So that could be scheduling in some creative work each day, or changing your shopping list to fruit and yogurt instead of Ben & Jerry's. Then just let it go so the magic can do its work. You've stated the intention, charged it through the ritual and handed it over to Saturn to deal with. Now you just carry on with your life and allow that intention to work below the surface. Give it a week and then the following Saturday have a think about how it's working out. Maybe you've finally started that novel that's been floating around your head for years, or you've developed a real fondness for blueberries and kefir. You might even find that you now actually enjoy being forcefully woken up by the sound of piss-poor tuba playing. Now of course you can get very elaborate with this if you want to, but at the beginner level, Saturn magic is mostly about choosing a Saturnian time, using Saturnian symbols and making a serious commitment, and then letting the universe guide you in the right direction. And if you'd like to wear some of that Saturn magic and look pretty stylish while you're at it, Otter Spirit have got some elegant dark gemstone jewellery that pairs beautifully with the kind of energy we're talking about here. Use the code KIPPY20 for 20% off or KIPPY30 for 30% off orders over $100. Links are in the description.
Kippy's Quest, Kippy's Quest. No.
So that's Saturn. Cold, slow, gloomy, strict, difficult, and about as much fun as waiting for a bus. But we must remind ourselves that without Saturn, everything falls apart. Without limits, there's no shape. Without boundaries, there's no protection. Without time, patience and discipline, nothing actually gets done. So really, we owe Saturn a debt of gratitude for stopping our lives from descending into free fall. He's the part of life that says,
No, not yet. Do the work, build the foundation, learn the lesson, keep the promise.
which is deeply irritating, but unfortunately also necessary. He doesn't give us the easy win, he gives us the thing that lasts, the skill earned slowly but properly. So perhaps Saturn isn't the villain of astrology after all. Perhaps he's standing between us and complete spiritual floppiness.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you, Saturn. Anyway, I'm sure you've got plenty to do. Don't let me keep you.
No, it's fine. I'm in no rush.
Oh, good. Well, anyway, join us next time to see how Mr. Happy there gets on when we put him in all the signs and houses. Then we'll be moving on to Jupiter, and not 1 minute too soon. I'm going to leave you with this quote from Mark Russell, who said, "The scientific theory I like best is that the rings of Saturn are composed entirely of lost airline luggage." Thank you for joining us on this sobering trip around Saturn. May your boundaries be firm, your commitments realistic, and your underpants be sensible. Until next time.